Welcome back to our news bulletin. Over 15,000 new cases have been reported across the world as the global death toll by the new coronavirus rises to nearly 9,000. But there is good news coming from China, where the outbreak began. This report has details.
As the world grapples with the severity of the new coronavirus pandemic, China, the place of origin of the fatal disease, has for the first time reported no new local cases over the past 24 hours. Beijing is now sending its medical teams to other countries struggling to contain the outbreak. The second team of Chinese medical experts arrived in Italy, where the virus has wreaked havoc.
The main difficulty we have now is the shortage of medical staff. Now, all doctors and nurses in Lombardy are involved in the fight against epidemic. We need medical workers because the peak number of confirmed coronavirus cases may come in a few days. So China's help to us is very important. The donations from China are what we urgently need, which can save many lives. I thank the Chinese people. Thank you.
Sub-Saharan Africa reported its first COVID-19 death, a high-ranking politician in Burkina Faso, as the World Health Organization urges the continent to prepare for the worst. New Zealand and Australia are the latest to shut borders to all foreigners as the hysteria of transborder coronavirus infections mounts. Spain, among the worst hit in Europe, is struggling to contain the virus at a time when the country is facing divisions over secession movements.
We must now put aside our differences. We must unite around the same objective to overcome this serious situation. And we must do so together among all of us with serenity, with confidence, but also with determination and energy. Now we have to resist, to endure, and we have to adapt our ways of life and our behavior to the advice of our authorities and the recommendations of our experts in order to beat the virus.
Beijing and Hong Kong are toughening up their 14-day quarantine restrictions as a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic returns with homecoming citizens. US President Donald Trump will invoke emergency powers, but California Governor Gavin Newsom says 60,000 homeless in the state could get coronavirus in the next 8 weeks.
The World Health Organization says the new coronavirus is an enemy against humanity as the number of global infections passes 200,000. Addressing a virtual news conference, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says the world needs to come together as one against this common enemy. He said to suppress and control the epidemic, countries must isolate, test, treat and trace. Ghebreyesus said if such moves are not taken, transmission chains can continue at a low level and will resurface once distancing measures are lifted. He said the test and trace strategy must be the backbone of the response in every country. The virus has claimed over 8,000 lives worldwide, while more than 84,000 patients have recovered. The new coronavirus pandemic has changed the way people interact and live, with lockdowns and social restrictions across the world. From empty streets in Paris to cleaner canals in Venice, all spheres of human social life bear an impact. Details in this report.
The French government has put up its 67 million people under lockdown in an unprecedented act during peacetime to stem the spread of coronavirus. The streets surrounding Paris' famous landmarks remain empty, with just a few cars seen on the roads. The normally bustling central plaza of Paris's main business district is also deserted at lunchtime.
It's been okay till now. It's more about having to stay inside, which is a bit stressful, but I'm lucky enough to have a dog, which makes getting around easier. For the moment, it is okay.
Usually business streets in the Athens are empty after Greece shut down all retail stores. In Belgium, Brussels streets and squares looked deserted after the country went into a total lockdown. The US tourist hotspots of Miami's fabled Ocean Drive is nearly empty, and restaurants and cafes remain closed.
Well, for locals this is a big relief because spring break was really wild here, but just the reason because all this happening, when you know what's the thing, then it's really sad, especially because they closed the beach from 5th to 15th Street.
While in the UK the impact of the pandemic on local businesses is huge following the government advice to cut down social contact. But all is not bad. Venice canals, usually bogged down with tourists in gondolas and motorboats, are now crystal clear for the first time in years. Italian government has closed the country for foreign tourists and told Italians to stay home.
U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad says this is the right time for Afghan politicians to put their differences aside. His statement comes as political uncertainty in Afghanistan continues amid parallel governments in Kabul. Khalilzad said all sides should resolve the political crisis resulting from elections and dual inaugurations. The envoy said political crisis in Kabul is undermining security in the war-torn country. He called for Afghan prisoners to be immediately released as per the Doha peace deal. Khalilzad also met self-proclaimed Afghan President Abdul Abdullah to discuss a way out of the political crisis in the country. Abdullah's office says the meeting could not find a solution to ease tensions with President Ashraf Ghani. More from Afghanistan. Afghanistan's self-proclaimed President Abdul Abdullah has thanked Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan over border opening. The cross-border trade through Pakistan is one of the main economic lifelines for the landlocked country of Afghanistan. In a tweet, Abdullah said he thanks Imran Khan for accepting Afghan traders' call to keep the Chaman-Boldak border open. Abdullah said the flow of foodstuff and key commodities through the border are essential in this critical time. He said Afghanistan highly appreciates this gesture as it further strengthens the bilateral ties. Moving on, Pakistan has rejected the Indian Foreign Ministry's remarks on a joint statement by Islamabad and Beijing on occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Office said New Delhi's claim that Kashmir is India's integral part is a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. It said over 900,000 Indian-occupied forces have not succeeded in subjugating the Kashmiri people in breaking their will. The Foreign Office said Pakistan and the international community will continue raising their voice for the Kashmiri people. Earlier, China vehemently opposed unilateral actions in Kashmir in a clear reference to India's 5th August move. International Press Institute says media freedom in occupied Kashmir is under a serious threat from Indian forces. In a report, the body said state surveillance and pressure on journalists in the valley have increased since August. The report said journalists have been stopped from going to the occupied valley to report on current developments. It said Indian authorities have evicted journalists from residences provided by the government. Quoting Kashmiri journalists, the report said occupation forces are stopping media coverage on human rights abuses in the valley. The report said August blackout is 55th internet blockade recorded in the valley in the year 2019. The valley is reeling under Indian curfew and communications blackout for the last 228 days. Over 400 village councils in 15 districts of India's eastern Odisha have passed resolutions against the Citizenship Amendment Act. 11 state governments, including Kerala, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh and Rajasthan, have passed such resolutions. After passing motions, a memorandum was sent to Odisha Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik and collectors of the 15 districts. Civil rights activists and organizations have been canvassing in these villages against the controversial law. Meanwhile, over 5,000 people took to the streets in Chennai to protest against the Citizenship Act. The protest near Marina Beach demanded its withdrawal and a resolution in the Tamil Nadu Assembly against the act. The Indian government is facing countrywide unrest against the act, in which 83 people have been killed since December. In Libya, 4 people are killed in a fresh wave of attacks by Khalifa Haftar's LNA forces in Tripoli. Haftar's forces launched 2 separate attacks on Anzara and Bab bin Ghashir areas of the capital. Health officials say 2 others were wounded in the raids. They said the attack on Anzara suburb killed 3 children from the same family, while a woman was killed in Bab bin Ghashir area. Heavy fighting between the Government of National Accord forces and Haftar militia has resumed since yesterday. Earlier, the UN and 9 countries called on Libya's warring parties for a humanitarian truce to cease hostilities amid COVID-19 pandemic. The US says it will retaliate to attacks on American forces anywhere in the world. The Pentagon statement followed the recent attacks on US troops and coalition forces in Iraq. In a briefing in Washington, Pentagon spokesperson Jonathan Hoffman says the US retains the right to defend its forces. Hoffman said the US is exploring possibilities on how to retaliate. In Iraq, at least 2 Americans and a British soldier were killed in an attack last week. 3 American troops and several Iraqi forces were wounded on Saturday in another rocket attack near Baghdad. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attacks. Iran has criticized the US for refusing to lift its sanctions during the country's battle against the COVID-19. The criticism comes as Washington sanctioned individuals for doing business with Iran's petrochemical companies. In a video message, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said the US is using its draconian policy of maximum pressure against Iran. Zarif said Washington's unlawful punishment is making it virtually impossible for Iran to even buy medicine and medical equipment. He said a bigger tragedy is that many companies and countries who officially oppose these sanctions are complying with them now. Zarif said Iran is the most intensely sanctioned country in history, not in line with UN decisions, but contrary to them. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Israel's President Rivlin has called his Palestinian counterpart Mahmoud Abbas and sought coordination to counter the coronavirus pandemic. Palestinian state media said President Abbas welcomed the initiative to contain the spread of the virus. This is the first call between the 2 leaders since US President Donald Trump revealed his Middle East peace plan in late January. The plan recognized Jerusalem as Israel's undivided capital. US President Donald Trump has signed a $100 billion emergency aid package to fight the novel coronavirus pandemic. The US Senate cleared the bipartisan measure easily by 90 votes to 8 before Trump signed the legislation into law. The legislation provides coronavirus testing for free, sick pay and paid family leave while boosting unemployment insurance for millions of Americans. This follows an initial $8.3 billion measure passed earlier this month, while a Phase 3 package worth over $1 trillion is also in the works. US President Donald Trump has also invoked wartime laws while deploying military hospital ships to meet New York City's healthcare needs. Meanwhile, 2 US congressmen, Florida's Mario Diaz-Balart and Utah's Ben McAdams, have tested positive for the virus. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has urged citizens to help fight the spread of the coronavirus by sticking to the latest rules. In a televised speech, Merkel said, "Not since World War II has there been such a challenge to Germany." She appealed to citizens to abide by the rules restricting public life agreed with 16 federal states earlier this week. Merkel said German citizens could now influence the number of fatalities there will be from the coronavirus. Her address to the nation was the first in nearly 15 years in office, other than her annual New Year's speech.
This is a historic challenge and we can only manage it together. I am absolutely sure that we will emerge from this crisis. But how high will the sacrifice be? How many loved ones will we lose? To a large degree, we have the answers in our own hands. We can now all act decisively and together. We can accept the current restrictions and stand together and be there for each other.
A massive prayer session in Bangladesh has sparked an outcry as a South Asian nation reports its first death due to coronavirus. Local police said some 10,000 Muslims gathered in an open field in Raipur town in southern Bangladesh. Police said the organizers did not get permission from authorities to hold the session. The organizers claimed the number of worshippers at the Khatme Shifa prayers was 25,000. The session was faced strong criticism as people say the organizers will be held responsible if anything happens to the citizens. Authorities in Bangladesh have already asked citizens to avoid large gatherings in an effort to halt the spread of the disease. The government of Pakistan has launched a chatbot to address common concerns related to novel coronavirus. Pakistan has so far reported 2 deaths and 247 infections. In a tweet, head of Digital Pakistan Tanya Idris said the institute wanted to build an effective way to get information out to Pakistanis. Idris said citizens can find labs near them and can do a quick test to assess the risk of coronavirus. The official said the bilingual chatbot can be accessed through Facebook Messenger. Digital Pakistan team collaborated with Botsify to create the software which connects users with the Ministry of National Health Services. In China, life is slowly returning to normal as health authorities report fewer and fewer cases of COVID-19 infections. Traffic has returned to many of the country's roads, restaurants are reopening, and factories are resuming operations. This report will now tell you more.
The coronavirus outbreak had kept the world's second largest economy locked down for weeks. Factories were shuttered down, leading businesses to fail and raising unemployment levels. Now, China is finally waking up from its COVID-19 coma.
Before, my psychological pressure was pretty high. I was very scared. A sense of fear persists, but now I feel better. For instance, going out shopping is very convenient. Not like the people overseas who are engaged in panic buying. In China, I don't have such a kind of pressure, and psychologically, I feel much released.
Most of the country is now slowly lifting restrictions and people are returning to work.
We sat so far away, I sent photos of us to share with our friends. We understand it. It's all about safety. Nothing really changes except that now we need to talk loudly. It is necessary for our health.
Cafes and some tourist sites have also reopened. Residents of Beijing are returning to parks, eager to resume their Tai Chi routines.
Today I'm outside because I've been indoors for too long. People are able to come out if they are wearing face masks. Generally, many places we go set up checkpoints for taking temperatures, right? What I'm thinking is that people with virus issues can't come out, and people who can come out are safe, so we are reassured.
After weeks of empty streets, Shanghai is also transforming.
Basically, before the epidemic last year, my business was very good, as opposed to now. From the morning till the night, I was busy. Now, basically, I don't come to the shop in the morning until I have lunch. And I'm finished by 3 p.m. with nothing left to do.
Economic officials claim that 90% of businesses are operating again. But with over 3,200 deaths and over 81,000 infections, the outbreak has left many scars.
The EU has accused Russia of a misinformation campaign aimed at aggravating the new coronavirus crisis in the West. The Kremlin has denied the allegation, saying it is unfounded and lacks common sense. The document by the EU diplomatic service says Moscow is pushing fake news online in English, Italian, Spanish, German, and French. It says the malicious reports on the virus are making it harder for the EU to communicate its response. The European External Action Service says the disinformation offensive is in line with wider Russian efforts to subvert Western societies. The EU says it has recorded 22 cases of disinformation since 22nd January.
We noticed that there was pickup in amount of disinformation fed from outside of the EU, among others also from Russia or from providers which are based in Russia or linked somehow to pro-Kremlin sources.
Saudi Arabia has announced to downsize its 2020 budget due to the economic impact of the COVID-19 and the consequent oil price slump. Kingdom's Finance Minister Mohammed Al-Jadaan says the budget will be cut by over $13 billion, corresponding to less than 5% of overall expenditure. Al-Jadaan also said developments will be reassessed and appropriate decisions will be made in a timely manner. Riyadh had originally set spending at $272 billion for 2020. The 2020 budget was already down from 2019 estimates by about 8%. Earlier this week, the kingdom announced its oil exports are set to increase over 10 million barrels per day as it plans to use more gas for domestic power generation. Australia's national carrier Qantas has halted all international flights from late March until at least the end of May. Flagship airline has also asked 2/3 of its 30,000 employees to take leaves in an effort to endure mass travel disruptions caused by COVID-19. The airline says it is temporarily laying off 20,000 employees due to 60% cut in domestic operations and suspension of international flights. Qantas Chief Executive Officer says the company is doing everything to support its employees. The company's senior executives and the board members have decided not to draw their salaries until the end of the financial year. The airline has also announced to delay its dividend payment of over $116 million from April 9th until September. Asian markets are struggling to find a stable ground as mixed indicators have jacked up volatility. Investor sentiments were propped up by fresh stimulus measures, but plummeting stocks have failed to mitigate fears. Seoul's Kospi has crashed over 8% following a brief market halt. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is trading about 2.5% lower. Nikkei 225 and Shanghai Composite is trading over 1% lower. In the US, Dow Jones has eased the last of its gains since President Donald Trump's 2017 inauguration as pandemic threatened to cripple US economic activity. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.